Yo, what's going on, everyone? This is Shields. How you doing? Hope you're doing well. Today we have every ride at Walt Disney World ranked. All right, so real quick though, I wanted to let you know I myself love Disney World, and I've been to Animal Kingdom, Magic Kingdom, Hollywood Studios, and Epcot tons of times. Used to live in Orlando, so I will critique this video. I will critique this. So anyone else that loves Disney, let's jump in. Let's see what this what we doing in this video. Let's see what it's about. There you go.
In this video, we're going to be ranking every single ride at Walt Disney World from worst to best. Of course, this is all my opinion, so be sure to leave your personal favorite rides in the comments below. With 58 of them throughout the 4 Florida parks, this was 58. A difficult list to put together. So without further ado, let's get this list started with number 58, Triceratops Spin. I know placing a ride like this all the way at the bottom,
which doesn't exist anymore. So I guess that's how we start. So it doesn't exist anymore. And by the way, feel free to go watch this video on your own if you don't want to hear my commentary. But I'm gonna probably pause after each. I'm gonna pause after he says his thing about each thing, and then I'll add my piece to it.
It may seem a bit silly. However, I truly think this ride is deserving of this bottom spot. This is the epitome of the worst Disney has to offer. A bare-bones clone of a better ride stuffed into the single worst land Disney has ever created. Dinoland USA has been falling—
I said worst? Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't be pausing this much. Or said worst land ever created? That's an argument.
Apart for a while now, and will likely be replaced with a Moana-themed land in the near future. Regardless, the few remnants of this land that live on stand as a reminder of what this land could have been and what it ended up being. Just a cheap parking lot fairground with nothing left to offer. Number 57, Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy.
Before we jump into this one, yeah, I think he's right. I'll have to see the others 57 through like 50 to really know if that's the worst one. But you know, I can only remember maybe riding that once. It's like a very slow ride. It's not meant for a lot of people to get excited about. However, here we go. 57, Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy. This is behind Rock and Roll Roller Coaster at Hollywood Studios.
I'll be honest, I didn't even know this existed until recently. Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy is a short kids show featuring characters from the Cars franchise, more specifically the first and third movie. Most of the show takes place on a—
Sorry, I'm gonna just pause, whatever. Notice how he said the second and third movie. Wait, did he say second and third or first and second?
Till recently. Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy is a short kids show featuring characters from the Cars franchise, more specifically the first and third movie.
That's right.
Most of the show
He said first and third movie. First and third. They skip over the second. The second was abysmal.
Takes place on a large screen, with the exception of the Lightning McQueen animatronic in the center. While it's pretty neat to look at, it doesn't distract from what is otherwise a pretty boring show. Don't get me wrong, it's perfectly harmless, and probably entertaining enough for the kids. Compared to other attractions at the resort though, including those for kids, this one just doesn't do much of anything to impress. Even if you're just looking for a show that lets you kick back a bit, there's so many better options at Hollywood Studios alone. Taking all that into consideration, this show has to place pretty low on this list. Also, before we move on, I just want to clarify that I'll only be discussing the pre-recorded shows at Walt Disney World. I'll be skipping live shows like Fantasmic, basic video shows like Awesome Planet, and improv shows like Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor. The rest, however, are
You're skipping Monsters Inc., but you included Cars? That means you don't have Turtle Talk with Crush. Alright.
Completely fair game. That said, let's move on to our next attraction.
By the way, so 57, I would say that's the worst. I'd say I'd put it 58 right now. Like, based on, I've never rode it, but just based on how it looked and how it sounds, nah.
Number 56, The Magic Carpets of Aladdin.
Okay.
This, like Triceratops Spin, is yet another clone of Dumbo, which means there's not a whole lot to say regarding the ride experience. The reason it stands above that ride is the theming surrounding it, which makes it slightly more enjoyable to hop on overall. Still though, there's no real reason for this ride to exist, and with how badly it blocks the paths in Adventureland, I kind of wish Disney would just remove it. That's never going to happen, but I can dream. Number 55, Prince Charles.
Okay, so I can kind of agree with him on 56. I think it's fine. they could possibly have done something different since they already have Dumbo, maybe a dark ride. But however, it's fine. Yeah, I don't disagree with the ranking. Number 55, Prince Charming Carousel.
Charming Regal Carousel. Despite being a park classic, this is yet another attraction I rarely go on because of how basic it is. It does make sense to give a theme park this big a carousel, and while it is nice to look at, it should also be self-explanatory why it's so low on this list. Number 54, Alien.
I don't like how you just said it's explanatory, because I think it's a classic. It's literally a classic, and it's right behind the castle. I think it makes sense. I'm wondering how this list is going to go. It seems like this list is like going to skew towards thrill. So that's probably the variables he's deciding on when it comes to figuring out what's a good ride versus a bad ride. However, I think there's more layers to it. I don't know if I'd put that ride that low. I would put that definitely ahead of this one.
Alien Swirling Saucers. Located in the center of Toy Story Land, Alien Swirling Saucers is a flat ride that's unlike anything else found in the resort. I mean, it isn't too different. In the end, it's just another type of spinning flat ride. However, at the very least, it's not another clone of Dumbo or the Mad Tea Party. Its unique ride system, paired with its colorful theming, makes it one of the better flat rides in Walt Disney World. It still doesn't get too high on this list, don't get me wrong, but it's not awful either. Number 53, the Hall of Presidents. I'll admit...
Okay, this is blasphemy. This is blasphemy. This list is blasphemy. Who here doesn't like this ride? Let me know below. I actually love this ride. I'm a history buff myself, but I mean, I think this ride is like, it's timeless. As it grows each time we have a new president, it teaches children and generations about history in a different way than you're used to it. It's a theater. It's a great way to cool down. The only reason I'm pausing it and telling you my side before I jump into his, because blasphemy should not be this low.
I feel a bit bad putting the show all the way down here, but I have to be honest with myself. At the end of the day, this is just a 15-minute video on American history followed by 5 minutes of laboriously naming all 56 US presidents. If it weren't for a far superior America-based show coming later on this list, maybe I would appreciate this attraction a little more. However, apart from all the animatronics, this show doesn't have a whole lot going for it. Number 52.
I just disagree.
Mission Space Green Mission.
Okay, so he's dividing green and red together. Okay.
Mission Space is a ride that consists of two different missions, the green mission and the orange mission. That was a lot of missions. Anyways, as the orange mission is pretty much a completely different ride, I'll be splitting this attraction into its two halves for the sake of this video.
Okay.
The first and less intense of those two halves is the green mission, which I found to be a perfectly decent little simulator. The visuals are alright, although the frame rate feels weirdly choppy at times. I also appreciated the added interactivity, although it isn't nearly as exciting as its orange counterpart. Unfortunately, I feel as though making this ride less intense kind of ruins the whole purpose of it. I don't want to spoil my thoughts on Orange Mission too much, but the G-forces pulled on that ride make it truly feel like a trip to outer space. Here, it just feels like you're stuck in a claustrophobic box that moves up and down a little bit. I understand its purpose considering just how intense the Orange Mission is, but I also can't justify putting this ride any higher up on my rankings. Number 51, Dumbo the Flying Elephant.
Okay.
I mean, it's Dumbo. I know I've already talked about two of its clones, but this ride places higher purely because it's the original. Also, it's out of the way, has some nice theming, and is a capacity machine with two identical sides. Maybe putting it even this high on the list is a little silly, but I do think the iconic nature of this ride makes it one of the better Disney flat rides overall.
I'll have to say it was 50-1, but yeah, that's all I gotta say.
50, Tomorrowland Speedway. When I was a kid, this seemed so much more exciting than it actually is.
I agree with this.
Having these cars go so slow and be restrained to a railing makes it much less exciting than a traditional go-kart track. However, for a kid who's too young to realize those things, I just know this ride is a great time. Personally, I can't say I enjoy it, but I understand its appeal for the younger guests. Number 49.
100% agree. I was more inclined to that as I was younger, grew up, and it's slower because I actually drive now, so yeah.
Journey into Imagination with Figment. Okay, I know there's some huge Figment fans out there, but I think the majority of people would agree that this ride needs some major work done. I've heard good things about the previous iterations of this ride, but unfortunately I've never experienced any of them myself. Nowadays, this ride is more annoying than charming. Despite some unique theming near the end, nearly everything else about this ride just doesn't hold up. That's especially clear when you exit, with a play area that seems right out of the 2000s. In the future, I hope Disney does more with Figment than just another popcorn bucket. However, as time goes on, that reality seems less and less likely. Number 4.
Okay, so like for that one, Dumbo's definitely better. Aladdin's definitely better. Speedway's better. President's is better. Shall I go on?
48. Kali River Rapids.
Okay.
The more I think
Very
about
different.
this ride, the worse it gets. Despite having a great drop near the middle, everything else about this ride is incredibly mediocre. It's weirdly short, with barely anything happening before or after that aforementioned drop. The titular rapids don't get you wet or offer any thrill, which leads to a ride that's more boring than fun. Even the theming is
Boring?
vapid,
I don't know
not
about
even coming
boring.
close to what should be expected for a Disney park. Especially compared to Popeyes and Islands of Adventure, this ride is honestly
compared
just
to?
bad. I think it had a lot of potential, but in its current state, it has to be one of the most bland and disappointing rides found at Walt Disney World. The drop is the only thing saving it from an even lower spot on this list. Number 4.
I mean, I wouldn't compare it to Universal. Universal is a whole different mindset of being in terms of a water ride, especially where it sits in the Toonland versus how this sits into more of the Asia category of Animal Kingdom. It's more meant for like the aesthetic and like the feel of being on the Kali River versus like a crazy rocky, whitewater adventure. So I think there's just a misalignment with how it feels that the ride should be versus how it is.
47. Astro Orbiter. This is the fourth and final Dumbo clone on this list, and for me, it is by far the best.
Okay.
Getting that elevated look above Tomorrowland is such a unique experience, and the ride itself has a really cool aesthetic to it. Beyond that, it's exactly what you'd expect from a Dumbo clone, but I still really appreciate its more unique aspects. Number 46,
disagree
the
with that.
Barnstormer. It's very likely that this was the first roller coaster I had ever ridden. For that, I'm forever grateful to this ride for introducing me to a whole new world of insane and intense experiences. Having gone on more thrilling rides since then, though, this ride doesn't have too much to offer. In terms of thrill, it's a coaster aimed at young kids, so there's only so much you can expect there. However, even in terms of theming, it just feels a little light. Maybe it's just nostalgia talking, but I prefer the old Toontown theming where you literally storm
I don't
through a
disagree with
barn.
this.
Either way, though, the
I think it's
Barnstormer doesn't
fair.
have much to offer as either a roller coaster or a themed attraction.
It's fair.
As a kid's first coaster, it's a solid ride, but nowadays it's one I rarely revisit. Number 45, Mad Tea Party. After thinking about it a bit, I believe the Mad Tea Party may just be the best flat ride at Walt Disney World. The ability to spin your own teacup allows the ride to be as basic or as intense as you want it to be. The theming is also pretty solid, with a look inspired by the style of Alice in Wonderland. It's not a masterpiece or anything, but it's still a pretty great flat ride that I'm glad is at the parks. Number 44,
agree with
It's
that.
Tough to Be a Bug.
Tough
This
to
show
Be a
used to
Bug.
freak me out as a kid. As soon as the villain Hopper appears, things start to get straight up scary. Bug spray, spiders, and some unique 4D effects all combine to create this very odd yet interesting experience. Even so, I feel like this show has some weaknesses that left me a little disappointed. This show relies so much on its gimmicks that it forgets it has to be a good show, too. The effects themselves range from good to straight up broken, which makes the weaker parts of the show stand out even more. Just as an example, on my most recent visit, the Flick animatronic was in a really rough state, and the Hopper animatronic was completely down. That made the second half of the show incredibly awkward, as Flick just stared into nothing and talked to a disembodied voice. An easy fix would be to add a backup mode like Rise of the Resistance, and have Hopper appear on screen instead. That and a few more updates could have pushed the show a little higher on the list. Even so, the core of the show itself just doesn't really click with me, which leaves it in a bit of a rough spot overall. The queue is pretty cool, as well as the theming and effects, but otherwise it's mostly meh. Number 40.
So that sucks. That sucked that I didn't have a good experience with the animatronics. I think they're gonna redo it. Actually, I think they're redoing this show. So, I mean, I would say it's a mid show. I think it's really cool. I was really cool in the early 2000s, especially with like the bugs leaving and like the smells and the 3D. 3D was at its peak at that time, like 2005 ish. But yeah, it's on its way out.
3. Country Bear Jamboree. I know for many people, this show freaks them out, and honestly, I kind of get it. Generally, this is an attraction I try to avoid when visiting the Magic Kingdom. However, whenever I do check out the show, I'm always more entertained than I'd expect. There's a lot of cool animatronics here, and it has a really fun energy once you get into it. Still, I can't deny the character designs are a bit creepy, and I understand why many people can't get behind this one at all. Kind of fun, but not great either. Number 4.
Ever since I first went to Magic Kingdom long time ago, that I think Country Bear Jamboree is one of the most iconic things that I would have in my memory, especially with like the animatronics on the wall, like the bison, the deer, etc. I think it's one of those rides that kind of holds the park together, as well as like Hall of Presidents or like other iconic things that have been there, especially as the park evolved over time. So I don't know if I'd keep it. I think I would put it actually in the 30s, but let's see what else we got.
42. The American Adventure. In my opinion, this is a much better America-focused show than the Hall of Presidents is. There's just a lot more going on, with plenty of animatronics and practical set pieces. It's still mostly screen-based, and not something I'd do every visit to Epcot, but it's certainly one of the more interesting shows found at Walt Disney World. Number 41. The Seas with Nemo.
I don't really have much to say about that one, but sounds about right.
Nemo and Friends. As a ride, Nemo and Friends is just okay. With this building being an aquarium and all, I suspect there wasn't a ton of room to build a full-on dark ride. Instead, this is more of a small attraction meant to push guests into the full exhibit. Again, the ride itself is just okay, but I want to commend the queue really quick for being much cooler than I remember. The way the lighting emulates being under the sea is incredibly well done. Unfortunately, everything else seems way too short and simple for a Disney ride. Number 4.
Okay, I disagree. I think they should be much lower in the list. It's a short ride. The projections aren't really clear when it comes to projecting the fish or whatever they're projecting to the water. It definitely needs a facelift for sure. But if you combine the aquarium, turtle talk with Crush, all of it, yeah, I think it deserves a 41 spot, but not by itself. By no means.
40. Frozen Ever After. This has a very similar problem to Nemo, in that the ride they fit into this area is just way too small. That's mainly due to it being a re-theme of Maelstrom, which in my opinion used this area of land much better.
Maelstrom, amazing ride.
Just an example, the old ride used to have the boat peer out from a waterfall outside, which was entirely removed in this version of the ride. Right after that is the drop, which is still present in Frozen Ever After but feels completely unearned in terms of the ride's story. Like, there's no real reason why we dropped down, it just kind of happened. The drop is still fun, and the theming is pretty good, but I can't help but feel like there will be better iterations of this ride at other.
I feel like that's the same thing with Pirates, with the drop. I feel like it doesn't have to be a drop, but it's just a drop.
Disney parks in the future. We've already seen the far superior Elsa animatronic coming soon to Hong Kong Disneyland, and the fact that Tokyo Disney Sea's ride building seems to be much bigger suggests that Epcot's version was merely a prototype for a better ride elsewhere. It's still a perfectly fine ride, but to me, it feels like a good ride got shoved into a smaller space than it actually needed. Number 39. Okay. Mickey's PhilharMagic. For a 3D show, PhilharMagic is pretty fun. It's full of great songs from classic Disney movies, and the interactions that Donald has with these characters are pretty charming. Still, it is a screen-based show, apart from the one animatronic that appears at the very end. That animatronic is pretty good, but there's still not a whole lot going on beyond what's happening on screen. These pre-recorded shows have a lot more potential in that regard, as an entry later on this list will prove. Number 30.
And I don't know if I think that one's a little low too, because this show evolves as well. So originally it's just like Lion King, Little Mermaid, the Renaissance video movies, but then it actually evolves. You start to see new films like Coco, for example. Coco actually integrates into the lineup, so you actually have a more modern film, and I'm sure they're just going to continuously evolve that as well. So, it might be too low.
38. Carousel of Progress. On a technical level,
how is this low? Of course, I have a different perspective, but this should not be this low.
This is a very impressive show. Having all the seats circle around the theater is very unique, and something you can only experience at a Disney park. Despite that, the show does seem a little out of date, especially by the end. I think the rest of the show is pretty good, if not a little boring, but the final scene is by far my least favorite part. I'm still very happy this show is at the Magic Kingdom, but it's not something I stop by on every visit. Number 37.
Okay, so first off, there's just barely any. I don't know of a ride or an experience that's the same. How it's on a rotating disc, and you're literally that's the ride. You're on a rotating disc, and it counterclockwise rotates the different decades. Another, like, you can see the history side of me, because it embeds history, which Walt loved, into the park for an experience. So you actually understand America from the 1900s up to the 2000s. So, I just disagree, because I think it's one of those timeless type of rides that actually have precedence to it. So I feel like I said, I feel like this is a list that kind of skews a little bit more towards thrill than anything else.
7. Slinky Dog Dash. This ride is one of the least intense roller coasters in the entire resort, which already puts it at a bit of a disadvantage. However, while other rides like Big Thunder Mountain make up for their lack of thrill with some fantastic theming, the theming of Slinky Dog Dash is unfortunately pretty barren. Apart from the Jenga Tower centerpiece and a few loose parts thrown about, the theming of this ride pales in comparison to most.
I don't know if he could be more wrong. I don't think he could be even close to being more wrong. Have you ever rode this ride, sir? Okay. I know I said I was going to wait till the end of each one, but no. Let's look in the background real quick. You see that this is a fence. Imagineers have constructed a ride that feels as if you are a toy. The fence and the background with the bushes, it looks like you're going through the backyard. The queue, the life size versus scale. Oh my God, it is like perfection. It is perfection how they created this. And I think that has a little bit of thrill. I think there's some thrill with the drops and whatnot. It's not like a barnstormer ride. I disagree.
Other Disney coasters. However, I will say the lighting package at night is honestly just stunning. It brings this area to life in a whole new way, and watching the train go around the track is so fun to see.
Then why'd you
Still,
put it so
I feel
low?
like this ride is heavily overrated by park guests, with it nearly always boasting an hour-long wait at least. It's a perfectly decent ride, but nothing deserving of all that. Number 36, Grand Fiesta Tour. The best part about this ride is the location it takes place. The Mexico Pavilion is such a pretty area, and putting a ride inside this building was a genius idea. All the physical theming is incredibly immersive from beginning to end, but unfortunately a lot of this ride is reliant on screen-based elements. It works as a good way to make jokes and show off iconic landmarks, but it does feel a little cheap overall. Luckily, the finale of this ride replaced the huge screen at the end with some fantastic animatronics, which makes for a much more satisfying conclusion. It has its flaws, but it's a nice little dark ride that I really appreciate. Number 35, It's a Small World. This is one of the most iconic dark rides ever made.
That's a good
ranking.
ranking.
The unique style of its theming really makes it stand out, but most of all, the thing that makes this ride so iconic is the song. For some, the song is nice and fun, while for others, it's incredibly annoying. Personally, it never bothered me too much, but with it playing on repeat in the background of the entire ride, I can understand how it becomes a little grating. Apart from that, I do think this is a cute little ride. It's nothing special in my book, and I do feel as though the Disneyland version is better, but I can't disrespect a ride that's so recognizable across the globe.
That's the original.
It's a small world after all. Number 34, Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin. For as fun as these shooting dark rides can be, I have to admit I kind of suck at them. The small targets combined with the low visibility of the laser can make it a bit tricky to perfect. Still, I know a ton of people who have mastered this ride, even if I'm not one of them, so I won't say it impacts the quality too much.
I don't hate that ranking though.
What does impact the quality is a somewhat out-of-date theming on this ride. Despite being just about 25 years old, this feels like one of the older and less capable attractions in the park. It still has its charm, and the interactivity does a lot to boost it in the rankings, but it does feel like a bit of a letdown overall. Number 33, Soarin' Around the World. This may just be the—
Really? My man has putting Soarin' at 33? Oh my goodness.
The hottest take in this entire video.
Yeah.
For years, I've considered Soarin' and Test Track the two best attractions at Epcot. I don't think I've been alone in saying that either, especially for a park that's a bit light on rides. However, on my most recent visit, I discovered something that kind of shocked me. Soarin' isn't really that good. I mean, it's a unique ride system for a simulator, with your feet dangling off the edge of the glider, but in the end, it is just a simulator. I appreciate the concept, with the visuals taking you from location to location, but there's a whole lot of flaws with the ride that are hard to ignore. First off, the queue is just bad. The architecture is somewhat unique, but there's not a whole lot to do or see when you're in line. There is a trivia game that pops up on some screens, but it feels kind of cheap and not all too fun, which doesn't pair well with the broken air conditioning in some parts of the queue. Then, the ride itself has its own set of issues. The most egregious of those issues is the curvature of the screen, which I guess is meant to match the motion of the ride vehicles, but in the end just looks a bit awkward. That's especially the case depending on where you sit, with the outer edges of the screen looking extremely off. Pair that with the feet of other riders blocking your view on the bottom rows, and it seems as though the perks of this ride system are met with just as many flaws. I know that was a lot of negative, but I want to reiterate that I don't think this is a bad ride. If you're one of those people who love it, I'm really glad you do. Personally though, I have to be honest with myself and put it here on my rankings. There's a lot to enjoy, from the sights, sounds, and smells, but in terms of simulators, I feel like Disney and many others have topped this ride tenfold.
Okay, so I don't 100% disagree with what he said. There's some things there, but you know, the how they built this ride on a scale model to how it performs today. You got to really think about that legacy. This is a technology that did not exist with the track system, to where you could actually bring up several different cars at once to watch a simulation. Usually you only bring one car in, so this was a different way of doing it. So for that reason, for the reason of the 4D environment, for, you know, just the experience itself to really feel like you're flying, I mean, it's not just a simulation. It's not a screen only. It's really more than that. So yeah, I think this deserves a little bit higher than that, per se.
32. Mission Space Orange Mission. This is why I decided to split up Mission Space.
This ain't bad.
The green mission is perfectly
is
fine for those looking to experience this ride without the intensity, but it's really that intensity that makes the ride what it is. It genuinely feels like you're launching into space, with the G-force pushing down on your entire body. It's simultaneously scary and extremely fun, along with being such a unique sensation. It's also totally understandable why this is the only Disney ride with built-in barf bags. It's very claustrophobic in your little space pod, which probably doesn't help with the forceful nature of the attraction. Regardless, I do enjoy this experience. There are some flaws like the choppy and outdated visuals, but it truly is a dark ride like no other. I understand why it ranks low for some, but in my opinion, Mission Space is a strange, one-of-a-kind experience that you can only find at Epcot. Number 3 feels a little squished.
No.
It's exactly what you'd expect.
Hold on.
Entirely removed in this version. A lot of the Buzz-like concept with the case of bold little space pod, which probably doesn't help with the forceful nature of the attraction. Regardless, I do enjoy this experience. There are some flaws like the choppy and outdated visuals, but it truly is a dark ride like no other. I understand why it ranks low for some, but in my opinion, Mission Space is a strange, one-of-a-kind experience that you can only find at Epcot. Number 30.
I think it's 100% down to preference. So some people are a little bit more nauseous than others. So I would actually combine the two instead of just putting it into one. Actually, he did good. He did good. I don't think that's a bad ranking per se. I thought he was going to put it like in the top 10 though.
1. Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run.
I love how
there's
these
a lot
two are
about
very
this ride
close to
I
each other.
appreciate, but at the same time, there's a lot I feel doesn't quite work. In terms of what does work, the theming of this ride is absolutely immaculate. It may be yet another simulator, but from the queue to the ride vehicle, every small touch they've added to this thing truly makes it feel right out of the movies. The ride system is also deceptively complicated, with a full-on interactive video game being controlled by 6 different guests.
That's crazy.
Unfortunately, that's where the problems start to arise. While I appreciate all the engineering that went into making this ride what it is, I feel as though it ended up unnecessarily overcomplicated. Unlike the other Star Wars simulator in the park, there's only one mission to go on here, and it's one that I feel is relatively boring in terms of its story. That's partially because of the strict in-universe nature of Galaxy's Edge, but also because this ride system is so complex that adding another storyline would be a whole lot of trouble. Apart from that, while the pirate role leads to a lot of interactivity, the other 2 roles are straight up boring. Next to nothing happens beyond pressing buttons, and it barely feels like you're affecting anything whatsoever. For that reason, this is a ride I rarely go on by myself. With a group, it's a perfectly fun time, but only really once or twice. Beyond that, the re-rideability isn't really there, which hurts an otherwise fairly enjoyable ride. Number 30, the mini...
I couldn't agree more, because first time I rode this ride, I think I waited for 2 hours, and it was hot. It was like in the middle of June, and it was just so unbearable. And like, you're wanting a payoff, right? Something like Rise of the Resistance, which I hope we see much later in this video. But in terms of this particular video, or I mean particular ride, I mean the theming's awesome, best part of the whole ride. But the ride itself is just so, it's like anticlimactic. You don't have something that you want to participate in per se. Maybe the first time with a group, awesome fun, but never again, really.
Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. This is a cute little dark ride that I can't help but enjoy. There's a lot of cool physical theming going on here, and some scenes that I'd consider absolute classics. I can't put it too high with it being a kid's ride and all, but I think it's a solid one. Not one of the best in the park by any means, but one that I stop by every once in a while. Number 20.
It is so dark. I feel like there's kids that have nightmares after watching Winnie the Pooh. Promise you that.
9. Navi River Journey. I'm very mixed on this ride. The way it combines physical...
This ride should be like... This should have been one of the worst rides on his list. This should have been one of the worst rides on his list. It is so... It's just like the Smuggler's Run. Amazing, like, theming. Horrible experience.
Physical set pieces and screens is utterly breathtaking, and the smoothness of the animatronic at the end is unreal. Still, while the theming is astounding, the ride experience itself doesn't have a lot going on. It's just very short and simple. With an extra minute and a drop, this very well could have been one of the best dark rides at Walt Disney World. Regardless, even if it didn't reach its full potential, I can't help but admire the immaculate work done on the theming. Number 20.
I think they tried to do like a Pirates of the Caribbean type motion with that, and it just, there was no thrill. There was no like, it was just like everything was always going well. Like you're just chilling. It's like I don't know. It's just like a dream almost. So it didn't feel authentically fun. For that reason, it should have been like the fifth worst type of position.
Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room. This is one of my favorite shows at Walt Disney World. There's so many animatronics packed into one small space, with more and more being revealed as the show goes on. It's incredible how well they're hidden too. Just when you think they're all up and singing, the show will reveal a whole new set of characters in an entirely different area. Still, with how little I actually go and watch this show, I feel like I can't justify putting it much higher than this.
That's fair.
I'd recommend everyone experience it at least once if they can, but I'll admit it's not quite a must-do at the Magic Kingdom. Number 27, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. This is interesting now. How it's this slow. Let's see what he says. Good yet very flawed ride. The rockwork and landscaping are pretty great, along with most of the theming. However, there are a few nitpicks I have which prevent it from getting any higher on this list. First off, the screen faces. They're just awful. It's a real shame since the animatronics themselves are pretty impressive, but the screen faces make them look so off-putting. It's not quite as bad as Frozen Ever After, but it still is just so strange. The second flaw is the actual roller coaster itself. Again, with it being Disney and all, I know I have to put my expectations in check when it comes to intensity. Even so, it feels especially tame, even when compared to the other roller coasters at the Magic Kingdom. If the rocking cart gimmick actually did anything, that lack of intensity could be more easily excused. Overall though, while it's a solid ride, I feel like there's much better coasters to be found at Walt Disney World. The queue is good, and there's some fun scenes, but it's not a favorite of mine, especially with its unusually long wait. Number 20. So, with his analysis there, it's fine. I don't hate how, it's just interesting how it's usually much higher. He's actually aligned with me more than the majority of people, I think. I think it's very short-lived versus the wait that you usually wait at least 90 minutes on something like this. And one thing, it's not available for Fast Pass, so you really have to wait that long no matter who you are, and the time it takes for you to get on the ride versus the ride itself. The animatronic seems at the very end, so it's kind of like you ride a little bit, then there's animatronic, then you ride a little bit and you're done. So they could have done so much better. I think it was just the real estate they had to work with just didn't make that really a thing that they could work with. 26, Test Track. Until recently, I absolutely love this ride. I think the concept is extremely cool, and the speed you feel at the end is simply unmatched. However, the reason why it's fallen this far down is the theming. Up until 2012, Test Track had a very unique car testing theme. I'll admit it was a little outdated, but I think the new theme just completely ruined it. The boring futuristic aesthetic does nothing to stand out, especially compared to the old theme which was so unique. Not to mention, the advertising in the queue of this ride is just obnoxious. Most of the time, I'm fine with the sponsored ride as long as it doesn't take away from the attraction. Here, the entire queue is a shrine to Chevrolet, along with the literal sales floor you pass on your way out. It's kind of insulting to the guests, and in my opinion, a total waste of what this ride used to be. Even so, the core of the ride is still there, and it's still very good. Each of the tests are uniquely thrilling, even if I don't quite love them as much as before. It may have some newfound weaknesses, but it's still something I always love to ride when I'm at Epcot. Number 25.
So two things here. First, it used to not just be Chevrolet, it used to be something else, another car brand as well. And the second point I would make is, I don't hate that there's a showroom right after you get off the ride, because the whole process and thought process of having Test Track is you're testing a vehicle to see if it's market safe. Can I have this vehicle go on the showroom floor? Is this vehicle safe enough? That's what vehicle manufacturers do. They do a test based off of the manufactured unit, and they test it with the things that you actually ride in that ride. So once the ride is complete, this is a car that we can sell. So here's the showroom floor. It makes sense. It's like how a lot of rides go into a gift shop. This is like the own version of a gift shop. So it's car related. So I like it. I don't disagree with the spot. Maybe 5 down. Between 25 and 20 would have been perfect for me, but let's see what else we got.
5. Living with the Land. I swear I'm not joking.
How do you put Test Track below this? This should be above Test Track. No, I'm sorry. Reverse that. This should be below Test Track. This should be no, Test Track's better than this.
Okay. Living with the Land is genuinely one of my favorite places to stop by at Epcot.
That's fine.
From the fantastic theme scenes in the first half to the extremely cool garden in the second half, there's just so much to see throughout this surprisingly long ride. It doesn't do too much outside of that, but there's something about the vibes of this ride that really appeals to me. I'm no Epcot enthusiast or anything, but this ride really helps me see the appeal of the park. I get why it can be boring for some, but for me, it's a really nice and relaxing ride. Number 24. Star Tours: The Adventures Continue. While this ride at its core is a pretty basic simulator, there's so much about it that really elevates it well beyond that. Most obviously, it's themed to Star Wars. That means it can use so many iconic characters and locations in order to tell its story. And unlike Smuggler's Run, this ride doesn't have to adhere to a specific timeline, which means it can go wherever and whenever it wants to. Before, that used to annoy me a bit, as you would see a character like Darth Vader immediately followed by Kylo Ren, who couldn't exist at the same time. Now though, I think the pure amount of scenarios on this ride really helps make it unique and incredibly re-rideable. There are 66 different combinations of scenarios to experience, with even more coming in the near future.
That's awesome.
That, paired with this ride's excellent sense of humor, puts it far above Smuggler's Run for me. Even if the theming isn't quite as good, Star Tours excels as the best simulator in Hollywood studios. Number 20.
So fun fact, in 2000, not sorry, in like 19, I think it was the 80s, and like very early to late, what was it, 86, 85, somewhere in there, they created Star Tours. They did a partnership. This was before Disney actually owned Lucasfilm. They did a partnership between Lucas and Eisner, Michael Eisner. They actually did a partnership where they were going to bring Star Tours to Disneyland's Magic Kingdom. Now, with that, what happened? What happened? 3 straight days they opened the park. They had to open the park for 3 straight days, continuous. So from like 1 8 a.m. throughout that night, throughout the next night. That's how long they had to keep the park open back in the 80s, because this ride was such a hit. And they moved this obviously to Hollywood Studios, originally MGM. And yeah, like he said, there's so many different scenarios. I didn't even know there was 66 different scenarios in the Rising. I bet you a lot of people don't know that. So that's an interesting fun fact. It makes that ride re-rideable.
23. Remy's Ratatouille Adventure.
How is this low? It should be in the top 15. Let's see why. Why?
I was surprised at just how much I enjoyed this ride. From the POVs, Remy's looked to be way too heavily reliant on screens, and not as much on its physical theming. However, what the POVs don't quite capture is the pure scale of everything.
So good.
As you're shrunk down to the size of a rat, everything around you looks huge, and that's captured perfectly with the physical theming of everything. There's some pretty great scenes here because of that, which really elevated the experience for me. Still, the screens were definitely the worst part, especially since the dialogue was untranslated from the original version in Disneyland Paris. It's just strange to have half the dialogue spoken in French, and it feels a bit lazy of Disney to not patch it up here. Regardless, I did.
What? I don't understand that one. Like, the dialogue wasn't translated? For me, it was. I don't know when he wrote it, but for me, it was, so.
Enjoy this ride a fair amount. It might be because my expectations were so low, or that I only got one ride on it, but even so, I do think it's a solid addition to the park. Number 20.
I rode that probably 5 times. Probably one of my favorite rides at Epcot. I might be the favorite ride at Epcot, actually. I mean, Guardians is up there, of course, but one thing with this particular ride, it moves just like Rise of the Resistance. It feels good, the environment, the scale, everything. And for me, it was in English, so it was a good ride. So I'd put it like at 15 or something.
22. Dinosaur.
The movie is the worst Disney movie of all time, but this was such a good ride.
Very good, yet very forgettable ride. Tucked behind Dinoland USA, this ride is a rethemed clone of the popular Indiana Jones adventure at Disneyland in California. Having been on that ride myself, it is far superior to this clone. However, that doesn't make Dinosaur a bad ride.
Sorry for that bump. But one thing to note, they're actually, as they're redoing Dino Land and Animal Kingdom, they're actually bringing Indiana Jones like they have in Disneyland to Orlando.
Theming is a little out of date, sure, but the dinosaur animatronics paired with the dark nature of the ride really put you right in this prehistoric world. Along with the violent movements of the ride vehicle, this is a surprisingly intense ride for a Disney park. If the animatronics worked a bit more consistently, this may have placed even higher on this list.
Funny.
Still, it's a solid ride, even if it doesn't quite match the superior Indiana Jones adventure. Number 20.
It's not a bad ride at all, especially for like children that are susceptible to like dinosaurs like myself. So I don't think it's a bad ride at all. I think it's a good ride. I'd probably keep it in the top 20, so just a few spots up. The movie was horrible. So for them to recreate like an Allosaur adventure like this and make it really like, I like it, not bad. And it really also, it's that history component, because during the ride, spoiler alert, you have like a meteor shower towards the end. So like just like the movie, you have meteors, you have all that. Definitely check it out.
21. Muppet Vision 3D.
I'm gonna put at number 21 Muppets. This is like 20 spots too high, my man.
Right, look. I'm a huge fan of the Muppets.
That's why.
Their humor really appeals to me, and all the characters are just so memorable and charming. Even putting that aside, though, I do think this is the best show at Walt Disney World. While many other 3D shows feel a bit cheap in their gimmicks, Muppet Vision leans into that perception by fully embracing it. The 3D effects are just as cheesy as the jokes, which really works for me as a big Muppets fan. Apart from that, there's so much this show does that goes beyond a simple 3D screen show. There's plenty of animatronics all around the theater, and even a live performer who goes out right in the middle of the show. Not to mention, the effects near the end are all incredibly well done. I'll admit, there are some moments that don't quite work as well as others, and in the end, this is just a screen-based show, but personally, I can't rank this any lower. As the last Muppet project that Jim Henson ever worked on, this is an important attraction for myself and many others. This is a fantastic show that stands as one of my favorites at Walt Disney World. Here's hoping that it keeps entertaining guests for years to come. Number 20, Peter Pan's Flight. I'll be honest and say I haven't been on this ride in years. I watched a POV to recap before
and I will tell you, this is way too high.
This video, but the line for this ride is just so extremely long that I haven't gone on it ever since I was a kid. From that POV and my own memory, this is a great classic dark ride. The way that height is simulated through shrinking the sets below you is such a cool effect, and the scenes on this ride remain iconic to this day. I understand why it's beloved, but I don't think I'll ever understand its popularity. It might just be capacity issues, but waiting over an hour for this ride is just absurd. It's good and everything, but like, yeesh. Number 19.
It's not that good. It's pretty much holding on to the movie itself. The movie carries the ride in that scenario. Usually, like in the reverse, Dinosaur, the ride carried the movie. It's the inverse here. But it's weird because the ride for Dinosaur is much better, but it was ranked lower by him, but it's much better. And the line is much, much longer for this one. Much worse. So it's very interesting.
Under the Sea, Journey of the Little Mermaid.
That's
This
fair.
is a ride I usually
fair.
skip, but having revisited it recently, I was surprised with just how much I enjoyed it.
It's pretty good.
The queue is one of the best in the Magic Kingdom, with some insane rockwork and detailing throughout. The ride itself is great too, with a ton of animatronics and nice colorful theming. I do think the ride's pacing is a bit of a weak spot, with it rushing through everything on land, but everything else is pretty great. Surprisingly, one of the best dark rides in the Disney parks. Number 8.
I don't disagree. I think they do rush it for the very end, but it's a very good ride. Amazing. Like you have the Under the Sea, you have like the feeling of going underwater, you have like the whole story of Little Mermaid. So if you've never seen Little Mermaid, it literally shows you like quarter by quarter of what happened in the movie. It's really nice. Definitely go check it out.
18. Rock and Roller Coaster.
That is crazy that he has Rock and Roller Coaster at 18. He's saying there's 17 better rides. Okay.
In terms of theming, I'll admit this ride is a little mediocre. The queue is just alright, and while the neon signs help a bit, theming is not the strong suit of this ride. What is the strong suit though is the thrill. This is easily the most intense roller coaster at Walt Disney World, being the only ride that goes upside down not once but 3 times. Pairing that with a great launch, and the thrill alone elevates this into the top spot. The layout does meander a bit by the end, but I still feel this is a pretty solid ride all around.
I think Rock and Roller Coaster is better than Space Mountain. It has better theming. I mean, Space Mountain is a little bit older. They have better Space Mountains around the world than Orlando. But Rock and Roller Coaster, the theming of it is a studio for Aerosmith. And then you have like a tour and you go on tour. It is like they tried to make this a long time ago, in the early 2090s. It was like paparazzi, you're a celebrity. I think this was at the park, not forget what park it's called, but it's not Disneyland. It's the one beside it, California Adventure. They were going to do a ride very similar to this, like you're driving through LA or something. In this regard, you're driving to get to the concert. You got backstage passage. You're trying to, and you hear the rock music, so it kind of gives you that rip ride rocket effect. Plus, you got that Space Mountain dark feel that you would basically get in the Mummy. More thrills than the Mummy, but at about the same. I don't know. I like it. Like, why is it 18?
17. Spaceship Earth.
This is a good one. It's not better than Rock and Roller Coaster, but it's a good one. This one also would be a little bit higher for me. Actually, I think I like it at 17.
Never in a million years would I have expected putting this above Test Track and Soarin'. However, this ride is just so much better. The theming is astounding, especially considering it's built into the icon of the park. I also think the story is just fascinating, taking you through the history of human communication. Even the weakest part of this ride on your way down has you surrounded by some intriguing and abstract theming that I find to be really engaging. The main thing that doesn't click with me is the whole future creation thing at the end.
Yeah.
It can be fun on your first time, but past that, it feels a little weird.
Yep.
All around, though, this is a fantastic achievement, and another example of why Epcot is such a unique and interesting park. Number 6.
Of course, they built these parks for mostly people to go to once, kind of like in the 50s. That was kind of the mindset. Not too many, not someone that has an annual pass or go multiple times a year by that means at all. So we got to keep that regard, even though they haven't changed that trivia at the end for a long time. This ride is phenomenal because it brings all the elements of the communications and history. Like you said, you get to go through the Stone Ages to the Bronze Age to the Renaissance to the modern age. Amazing. And they do it all in the icon of the park, the sphere. So for them to be able to do that within the entire sphere and keep the theming elements and the ride pacing and everything succinct, it's amazing. Probably one of the best rides they've ever built just because of the dynamic of how they built it.
16. The Tomorrowland Transit Authority People.
People Mover is at 16, guys. Why? Why did you say the Rock and Roller Coaster is not good? Oh my goodness. This guy thinks the People Mover is better than Rock and Roller Coaster, guys. This is like the 50th this is going to be the most biased. You know, you guys, I just jumped off of the deep end here. This is going to be the most biased thing you're ever going to hear, what you're about to hear. Because he's going to probably talk something with either nostalgia or it's a time you can cool off and walk. It's not a ride. That's the variables. Oh my goodness. Let's go. Let's go.
This is secretly one of the best rides in the Magic Kingdom. Something about taking this aerial tour of Tomorrowland is so relaxing and enjoyable, with a great view of Space Mountain and even Cinderella Castle. What really does it for me though is going beyond normal guest areas. Heading into the shops and restaurants is cool enough as is, but literally getting to go inside Space Mountain is incredible, especially if you get the chance to see it with the lights on. I think having gone on this ride so many times in my life really made me grow to appreciate it. There's just something about how perfect and intricate it is that really does it for me. I know there's plenty of others who feel this way too, so for all of us, I'm glad to represent it by putting it this high on the list. Hopefully, Disneyland gets their version back in the near future. Probably not though. Number 5.
So, I don't disagree with him. It's a great time. It feels so good to get off your feet. After walking around for 6-7 hours, you finally made your way all the way from Frontierland, Adventureland, all the way through Fantasyland. Now you're in Space Mountain area. You're in Tomorrowland. You're about to, you want to take a break. So you're either thinking the Carousel of Progress or the speed, or not the speed, but the People Mover. People Mover always gets chosen first. So you get in the People Mover, you finally relax, get your phone out, you just relax. A lot of the times you're not even paying attention. It's more or less like a moving bench. Now, I love the moving bench, but these are rides we're talking about here. So for you to put this above the rides that you put it above, wow, I put A Bug's Life above this ride. That's how far back I would probably go. That far. So I love the People Mover, but I don't like the selection.
15. Jungle Cruise. This is another ride I've been on countless times, but unlike the People Mover, I actually feel as though it's made me like it a bit less as time goes on. Don't get me wrong, this is still a fantastic ride.
That's fair.
I love the theming throughout the entire attraction, from the dense jungle to the dark and moody temple. That goes for the animatronics as well, which have aged pretty well considering how old this ride is.
True.
However, what really sells this ride for me is the cheesiness and sense of humor. The jokes are really lame, but simultaneously really great, which makes it a joy to experience every now and again. The reason it's fallen a bit behind in my rankings though is just how repetitive those jokes can get. The skipper does throw in their own stuff from time to time, but for the most part, the script remains unchanged. It's still very funny and memorable, but it does make this ride a little less re-rideable overall. Like I said though, I still adore this ride, which is why it ranks so highly on this list. It's just one little flaw in an overall great attraction. Number 4.
So, by the way, fun fact, here's a question for you to answer in real time. What was the Universal copycat / competitor to the Jungle Cruise? It was Jaws. And of course, Jaws died off, and at least the Orlando version. But Jungle Cruise was actually the first laugh that ever was recorded at Disneyland back in the 50s, because they had added Jungle Cruise, Jungle Cruise had been there since the beginning, but then they did some modifications to it, like some more comedy focus rather than just serious. And as they added the comedy to the actual movie, well, not movie, but the ride, it got more popular. So I don't disagree. This is a very good spot for it to live. 15. Top 15 is good. All right, what's at 14?
14. Toy Story Mania. On its face, this ride should be nowhere near the top 15. It's a heavily screen-based attraction with next to no physical theming whatsoever. Even so, I can't help but have a blast on this ride. It's addictively fun, being a score-based shooting dark ride with infinite re-rideability. Pulling on that string is so satisfying, especially paired with the colorful visuals and targets throughout. Even though it's screen-based, I honestly much prefer this ride system to the style found on Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin. While I feel it's a bit hard to aim there, here it's fairly easy to know who you are and what you're shooting at. That makes it extremely re-rideable, with a constant urge to beat your score and the score of those in your party. Overall, despite how simple it may be, there's something about this ride that makes it a standout at Walt Disney World. Objectively, it might not be fantastic, but personally, I just love it. Number 13.
So, fun little story real quick. So, I only rode this ride once, and it was in the hottest part of the summer in June of 2022. And it was me and a couple family members, and we were in line actually for we were in line actually for Slinky Dog. Slinky Dog's a little hour and a half, 2 hours long, and my family finally got towards the front of the line, and it started lightning. They're not going to do Slinky Dog if there's lightning, so they had to wait, and there was more lightning, so it was like not going to happen. So anyway, long story short, Slinky Dog doesn't happen. We have to make our way to guest relations because they told us to go there, and they comped us like lightning lane for Toy Story Mania, because none of us thought about how fun Toy Story Mania could be. We always thought like, oh, it's going to be like Buzz Lightyear because it's going to be that type of feel and dark ride, blah blah blah. Blown away. Great ride. I don't disagree with the 14 selection at all. Let's keep going.
Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. This is a great dark ride. While I do have a soft spot for the Great Movie Ride, especially as a film major, I think this ride overall is just a tiny bit better. The projection mapping is expertly done and makes for an incredibly fun trackless dark ride throughout. There's so many great effects and moments here that truly make it something special. The one major flaw with this ride though is the queue. Being a re-theme of the Great Movie Ride, the outside facade and queue remain themed to the iconic Chinese theater, which doesn't work out well for a Mickey and Minnie attraction. No. Especially compared to the queue over at Disneyland in California, it's not even close. Despite that, this is still a great ride and gives the titular mouse an attraction worthy of his name. Number 12.
Yeah, and the fun part about it is you actually have other elements. You were showing Daisy's like ballet class at the end of that. Now, I wish they could have kept the Great Movie Ride and also found another space in that map of Hollywood to actually put Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Mountain or Runaway Railroad. I don't know why they, I guess it's a budget thing. I wish they had both.
Splash Mountain. As you may already know, this ride is no longer operating.
So this is nostalgia.
But my audience decided on a poll that I should include it here anyway.
Okay.
Since it isn't at the park anymore, I don't want to dwell on this ride too much, but I'll quickly give my opinion on it before we move on. Splash Mountain had some fantastic theming and some great drops for a water ride. While I do feel the Universal water rides are more thrilling, there was something about Splash Mountain that really stood out, primarily with the animatronics, rock work, and music. As time went by though, it felt more and more like this ride needed some serious work done. The rough state of the attraction by the end of its life is what made it fall out of the top 10 for me, along with it not feeling quite as thrilling the older I became. Still, I do think this was a very good ride, and I'm hopeful that whatever Disney does next will be just as good, if not better. Number 11.
Isn't that so true though? As you grow up, you get more, I guess you're more cynical about things. You don't feel, you're more critical as well, right? You're looking around like, oh, this wasn't as fun as I thought it was. Oh, this is mid now, etc. So I think Splash Mountain, we'll see what his 11 through 1 is, but I guarantee you, if I made this list 3 years ago, because I wouldn't make it with Splash Mountain today because it doesn't exist. If I made it 3 years ago, Splash Mountain's in the top 10 for sure. So let's see what's 11 through 1. Maybe Splash Mountain would sneak back in there.
11. Tron Light Cycle Run. As the newest attraction at Walt Disney World,
that's kind of crazy that he doesn't have it in his top 10. Okay.
There may be a bit of bias putting it this high on the list.
No?
However, despite how long it was under construction, Tron surprised me in both good and bad ways. Starting with the exterior, the distinct wavy cover surrounding this attraction is very unique.
Yeah.
It leaves space for a huge hub area before you enter the attraction, which is something I can't say I've ever really seen on any other Disney ride. I've heard this area is especially pretty at night, but unfortunately I've only ever seen it during the day. Even so, it's a unique entry point into the futuristic world this ride puts you in. Once you enter the ride building and head into the queue proper, the theming starts to get really good. The pre-show is so cool, timed perfectly to sync with the launch track of the ride itself. Then, after putting your belongings in a locker, you're ready to board the light cycles and get on your way. The room where you board is huge, with a sense of scale rarely seen at the Disney parks. Boarding the ride itself, though, is less magical. The restraints for this ride are incredibly odd, having you lay down on your stomach before having a clamp on your back.
Yeah.
It was a little uncomfortable for me, but for others, it meant they literally...
That's just like the way of the water, though. Right?
...could not board the attraction without getting in a specialized car on the back of the train. I'm glad Disney had the foresight to put these here, but it's still a bummer that these ride vehicles are as uncomfortable and unaccommodating as they are. After that, though, the ride itself is a thrill. The standout is obviously that initial launch out of the ride building before heading back to complete the race. While the rest of the ride is still very good, that first part is unmatched by nearly any other coaster at Walt Disney World. By the time you reach the brake run, your heart will still be pumping from that adrenaline rush. To sum it all up, Tron is a fantastic experience with a few minor flaws. With a few tweaks, this could have been the perfect addition to Magic Kingdom. Even so, Tron is a great experience that I'm happy to see finally open. Now just get rid of the virtual queue and we're all good.
I do agree, virtual queues suck, but what we'll say about that, I feel like his main concern was like how he's positioned on the said ride. I understand that, but you also have to feel about, they try to go for realism as well. If how the movie goes with the motorcycles, etc. They try to do the similar feel there, so you can't really be it wouldn't be authentic really if you were sitting up like this on a motorcycle, right? So
Number 10. Kilimanjaro Safaris. On the surface, Kilimanjaro Safaris is a fairly simple drive-through zoo, showcasing a wide variety of different animals. However, I think that's a huge part of the draw when it comes to this attraction. Every time you ride, you might see something completely different. Not only that, but I think the theming of this attraction is hugely understated. Despite it obviously being a safe experience for both the guests and the animals, it's incredible how seamless the barriers are between them. It's expertly crafted to make it seem as open and natural as possible, which I think no other park can do quite as well as Animal Kingdom. Six Flags Great Adventure had a similar experience to this, and while it was still very cool, it doesn't quite match what Disney was able to do here. Considering the space and money required for a project like this, it's incredible that it was even made in the first place. Regardless, Kilimanjaro Safaris is a great attraction that's a must-do in Animal Kingdom. Number 9.
okay, we cannot just skip over that real quick. We have to go back. We're not even gonna look at number 9 right now. We're gonna stay around these giraffes. This is probably first off, this is the most iconic ride in Animal Kingdom by far. Duh. Of course, this is the ride that carries Animal Kingdom. This is the Tree of Life is not the icon of the park. It is Kilimanjaro Safaris. Everyone that goes to Animal Kingdom goes to this ride. They're not pulled by Pandora. They're not pulled by Everest. They're pulled by Kilimanjaro Safaris. Then they go everywhere else. This is the most walked to ride. Yeah, it's that good. It's amazing. I love it. And people don't realize until you're like 12, 13, 14 years old, or you just don't know, you feel like there's no barriers between. I mean, look at this path and the giraffes. You feel like they can just walk right across because guess what? They can. And when you're going over the alligators, the hippos, you feel like, oh, we could just fall over and we're dead. Like you actually have that adrenaline and that amazing optimism of how animals and humans react. So 10 out of 10 ride. I didn't even put this like at 5 really, but let's keep going.
It's incredible that it was even made in the first place. Regardless, Kilimanjaro Safaris is a great attraction that's a must-do in Animal Kingdom. Number 9. Haunted Mansion.
Of course.
Many would argue that this is Disney's magnum opus, and I can't say I fully disagree. The Haunted Mansion is simply unmatched in terms of its spooky atmosphere. With the single most iconic pre-show at any Disney park, this ride starts off strong by putting guests right into this strange and surreal mansion. From there, the ride is filled with some great effects and plenty of animatronics, all of which really add to the atmosphere of the ride. Compared to the other attractions that use the Omni-Mover ride system, I do think this one is easily the best. However, that ride system has some flaws that I feel takes away a bit from the ride experience. Since some guests need an extra bit of help to get on and off their ride vehicle, it's not uncommon for the entire system to come to a stop to give them time to get on.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not the fault of any guest. Instead, it's the fault of a ride system that prioritizes capacity over everything else. Not to mention, the turning motion on this ride is incredibly jerky, which seems to have developed as the attraction has aged. Apart from my Omni-Mover nitpicks though, I have to agree that this is a fantastic dark ride. The ride system may have some flaws, but everything else about it makes it one of the best dark rides in the Magic Kingdom.
So everything you just said is almost 100% correct. Now, I do like the jerky motion because it feels like you're like in a haunted house. Like you're just nothing's just smooth. I like that. But yeah, I 100% agree with it. Like I just, when you're like, you're relaxing, you're in the mood of Haunted Mansion and everything, you're just laying back and you're like, oh, it's just taking it all in. And then all of a sudden, you're just like, stop. Everything just, it's like the magic just goes away and all that. It just doesn't feel authentic enough. So, and then I've actually experienced it 3 or 4 times in the same ride where it'll stop, even within like the 30 seconds of each stop. So, you know, maybe there's an opportunity for them to figure out how they can build in a more, you know, friendly version of that where it's not going to do that often. But top 10 is not a bad spot for Haunted Mansion to live. Where's number 8?
Number 8, Expedition Everest.
Okay.
Located all the way in the back of Animal Kingdom, Expedition Everest is widely regarded by most as the best roller coaster Disney has ever made. I don't quite share that same opinion, as you'll soon see, but there's obviously a reason it ranks so highly on this list. The rockwork and scale of this ride is simply extraordinary. As long as there's no train on the bridge, the mountain looks staggering, which makes the expedition itself that much more exciting. There is this little warm-up before heading into the ride proper, which is an overlooked aspect that I think was a bit unnecessary. Regardless, it's a nice little appetizer before heading into the full-course meal. That meal is pretty great, from the fake-out track at the edge of the mountain to the backward section immediately following. From there, you get some thrilling turns and hints of the Yeti's existence in the mountain. While the Yeti animatronic has been famously broken for years now, it's still a nice touch before finishing off this intense adventure. There are some weak points, sure, but overall, Expedition Everest remains one of the best roller coasters you can find in Orlando. It has some steep competition from both Disney and other parks, but it still remains a standout attraction within that crowd. Number 7.
Okay. So I'm excited to talk about Expedition Everest. So whenever I went in 2005, that was like the pinnacle of like a fun. I was like 8 or 9 years old. And be able to go to, the Expedition Everest area where you see the mountain and you're like, and actually watch the DVDs they sent to like everyone in mail where you actually get a preview of what the park's gonna be like, and seeing the Yeti. I was terrified of the Yeti. And for a ride to go backwards and project everything, just exciting. It is breathtaking. So don't disagree with this at all. It will slowly decline. It will go down the list as the years go by because that's what everything always does. You know, that's just the way it goes. But 10 out of 10.
7. Pirates of the Caribbean.
I'm surprised it's this low. I thought it'd be top 5. Okay.
Out of all the classic Disney dark rides, Pirates of the Caribbean is surprisingly my favorite. Up until my most recent visit, I thought this ride was very good, but nowhere near the top 10. Now though, I fully understand the praise this attraction gets. While many other Disney dark rides have fantastic theming, the scale of this ride is simply unmatched.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as you head down that drop, you're met by a massive ship battling against those on land. Past that, you have some iconic scenes taking place around a local town, which are both comedic and perfectly detailed. All of the animatronics are great too, bringing each scene to life through their dialogue and movement. The only flaw I can point out with this ride is that everything before the drop is done much better over at Disneyland. There's just so much more detail to the cave scenes, and floating by a restaurant is such a cool experience only matched by the Grand Fiesta Tour at Epcot. While California's version is superior, the one here in Florida is no slouch either. Pirates of the Caribbean is a fantastic ride that's more than worthy of a spot on this list. Number 6.
I'd hope so. But it's interesting that he says Disneyland's version's better at the front. Obviously, I've never been to Disneyland, so that's interesting.
Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind.
Very nice.
This is yet another recent addition to the Disney parks, and in my opinion, one of the absolute best. While many people have called this a modern Space Mountain, I almost feel like it's more comparable to Rock and Roller Coaster. Like that ride, every time you hop on Cosmic Rewind, a completely different song will be playing. That makes this coaster an absolute joy to re-ride, as every experience will be slightly different than the last. The other clear comparison is the launch, which has the distinct difference of starting off backwards. While overall, I think the launch on Rock and Roller Coaster is a bit more punchy, Cosmic Rewind's launch almost feels disorienting. The seats turn around right at the end of the launch track, putting guests face first into a bunch of flashing lights. For some, that may seem kind of awful, but personally this was an extremely awesome start to an awesome roller coaster. Compared to Tron, this ride feels extremely long, taking the track places you had no idea it could go. More importantly though, the theming is a huge improvement over the aforementioned Rock and Roller Coaster. The screen elements aren't the best, sure, but the star projections and other space theme props really elevate this ride beyond just a good coaster. The effect at the end especially impressed me, being such a cool showcase of projection mapping technology. While the queue feels a little squished into the old universe of energy building, the pre-shows following it are pretty solid. Some of the dialogue is a bit painful, sure, but the effects used throughout are really understated yet very well done. As a whole, I enjoyed this ride way more than I was expecting. While it has some unique imperfections, it also excels in ways that no other ride at Epcot can achieve. Number 5.
So that's interesting. By the way, I've never been on this ride. Never been on that ride. Usually I would go to Epcot in like the later part of the day. So like after like 1 or 2 p.m. So I never had a full day at Epcot. I basically could take care of anything from 2 to close versus staying at Epcot's not really an all day park. So they have virtual queues. So you have to actually do that as early as possible. So never actually rode this ride. It looks interesting though. Interesting.
5. Avatar Flight of Passage.
Number 5. A lot of people think this is the best ride. All right, so there's 4 better than this one in your opinion. We haven't heard Thunder Mountain, Space Mountain. We haven't heard Rise of the Resistance or Tower of Terror. So those are the 4 above this one, I would assume.
Kicking off this elite top 5s is a ride that I consider the best simulator ever created. Despite being themed to a franchise I don't care much about, Flight of Passage stands out by being a breathtaking combination of technology and theming. The queue of this ride is, in my opinion, the best in the entirety of Walt Disney World.
Really?
The way it dynamically switches from location to location, each having its own distinct look while moving you further into the caverns, is simply genius. Everything about this queue is expertly crafted, from the bioluminescence of the plant to the underwater animatronic in the lab. Then you have the ride itself, which is the single most immersive simulator I have ever been on.
It is amazing.
The seat breathes to mimic the breath of the Banshee you're riding on. A small fan blows air and water to simulate a sense of speed. Even small details, like the 3D glasses having peripheral vision, all add up to make for an incredible experience.
Amazing.
The only thing I can think to complain about is the somewhat boring pre-show, but even that I can understand. Altogether, Flight of Passage is an astounding achievement and one of the best rides Disney has ever made.
So true.
Number 4, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. For a long time,
Let me comment real quick on the Avatar. So Avatar Flight of Passage, amazing ride you have to do. It is so authentic. It kind of you're in the same stance obviously as Tron, like more of like a low down field, like you're on a Banshee. The immersiveness, the smells, everything in between, it's just 10 out of 10. It's definitely in the top 5. So number 4.
One of the best rides Disney has ever made.
Number
4, Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. For a long time, I considered this to be my favorite roller coaster in all of Walt Disney World. Everything about this ride is just great. In terms of theming, this is up there as one of the best themed coasters in the world.
Oh yeah.
The rockwork is so intricate, and the little details scattered throughout really add a lot to the experience. Not only that, but this is a surprisingly fun coaster too. It's not quite as intense as Cosmic Rewind or Expedition Everest, but I feel as though the balance between theming and thrill is even better here than on those 2 rides. Apart from that, the queue is pretty solid, the indoor section is a nice introduction to the ride, and the rickety lift up the 3rd hill is a unique element that adds really even more to an already fantastic ride. Overall, while it's no longer my favorite Disney coaster, it remains one of my favorite rides in the entire resort without question.
Okay, so we got Space Mountain. We have what was it? Tower of Terror and Rise of the Resistance. By the way, but number 4, yeah, Big Thunder Mountain. It's awesome.
3, Star Wars Rise of the Resistance.
Okay.
This ride seems unreal. From beginning to end, everything about Rise of the Resistance is just staggering. The seemingly endless pre-shows, the pure scale of the ship you board, the non-stop action of the ride itself, it's undeniably an incredible achievement. The ride starts out with the first pre-show on Batuu, where you're instructed to board a transport ship on your way to another planet. The following pre-show has guests packed onto this transport ship, which itself has its own little ride system that simulates motion throughout. Eventually, you're captured by a Star Destroyer and led down a hallway into an interrogation room. That's where the 3rd pre-show takes place, where guests find themselves face to face with the villain Kylo Ren. After that, you go through a secret door and into the ride proper, which uses a trackless ride vehicle to keep the ride both dynamic and engaging. Combined with the incredible theming all around this vast spaceship, and it's no wonder why many would call this the best ride at Walt Disney World. As a theme park fan, I completely understand that praise. The amount of ride systems, animatronics, and visual effects that went into making this ride work is kind of absurd. The downside of all that is how unreliable this ride is. One of the most common examples of this is the Kylo Ren animatronic, which often breaks down and sends the ride into B mode. There's plenty of other issues too, both technical and fundamental, but they're hardly worth dwelling on considering how much this ride does right. Apart from the technical issues, lackluster queue, and ugliness of the floor, there really isn't much I can complain about when it comes to Rise of the Resistance. This is one of the most incredible dark rides you can find at any theme park in the world, and undoubtedly one of the best things that Disney has ever created. Number 2.
That's not a bad assessment. The interesting part is I've actually seen the Keller thing broke at one point, so obviously there was a different experience. The floor doesn't bother me too much. It feels real. It's overall one of the best rides that exists in the world.
2. Space Mountain. Between this and Big Thunder Mountain, I had a tough time picking my favorite ride in the Magic Kingdom. However, there's just something about Space Mountain that makes it completely untouchable. Despite how old this ride is, it's amazing how well it holds up today. The queue and ride itself flawlessly immerse you in the dark void of space, while also having a certain aesthetic that differentiates itself from the more modern idea of what the future may look like. Even just as a roller coaster, it's surprisingly thrilling. Sure, the track is a bit janky, but for me, the jank is part of what makes this ride so much fun. Despite its lackluster stats, the ride itself is great, with guests soaring through the stars in their own little spaceships. Honestly, I can't even think of a flaw with this ride. From beginning to end, it's such a perfectly crafted experience that still stands the test of time today. Not only is it the best ride in the Magic Kingdom, but it may just be the most iconic ride ever made. Number 1.
Okay. I don't like the rickety. I don't like the janky and all that. I don't like that. I like a ride that's a little bit more smooth. If it was janky and rickety, let's be like Big Thunder Mountain, where I can see what's happening and why it's happening. So when I'm on Space Mountain and it's doing this, I'm like, oh God, what's about to happen? I can't see. If the outdated ride is, I wish they would remodel it and revitalize it to something that's a little bit more modern, so it feels better. So when I was getting out of the car one time, stepping out, I almost lost my wallet. My wallet was in my pocket. It's just how you're so crunched down and you have to it's a top 10. It's a top 10, but I'd probably put like 9 or 10.
1. The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror.
Course.
This is the best ride in all of Walt Disney World.
It's a top
Tower
2.
of Terror is
It's
the
number 2
perfect
for me.
combination of theming, thrill, and re-rideability, all culminating in an experience that is unmatched nearly anywhere else.
Right.
From the eerie queue leading you deeper inside the hotel, to the iconic pre-show with plenty of memorable lines, everything before the ride begins is astounding in its own right. Every inch of the hotel is immaculately themed, giving off an unsettling feeling to any guest who's stepped through its doors. Beyond that, you have the ride itself, which is filled with so many fantastic and innovative effects that keep guests on their toes the whole way through. The first scene as you're ascending the lift is such a strange yet creepy start, and everything after that continues to emulate that unique vibe. There's an extremely cool scene that's only present in this version of the ride, where the elevator moves through a room in a way you never expect to see. Then you get the drop tower itself, which is easily the best that's ever been created. The drops are incredibly thrilling yet completely randomized, occasionally giving you a peek down at the park below you. The sequence is very long too, with the randomized aspect giving plenty of reason for guests to hop on again and again. Overall, considering everything this ride excels at, I have to give it the honor of being the single best ride at Walt Disney World. It's a flawless experience from beginning to end, and one that I can't wait to get back on whenever I next visit the Disney parks. If you made it—
Oh no. Pause.
Nearly a year ago today.
Okay, there we go. Well, it looks like I got a new video to react to after this. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. What do you guys think? Let's real quick. Let's recap. I don't think that's a bad selection for number 1. It'd be interchangeable for me between that one and Rise of the Resistance. But it just depends on the day really. I mean, it really just depends on the day. If you don't have a broken Kylo, Rise of the Resistance. If you do, Tower of Terror. It's not a bad list. There's a couple flaws in this list when it comes to personal bias. But I mean, that's anyone, right? Anyone has personal bias. But I mean, Hall of the Presidents, I think could have went up like 10 or 15. Philhar Magic could have went up like 5 or 6. Soarin' was way too low. Let me actually back out of this and see what else. Let me remember what the
In this video, we're gonna—
What else? I wish he had like a tier or something. He put like the land, Living with the Land above Rock and Roller Coaster, which was crazy. So Rock and Roller Coaster was too low. Test Track was too low. Muppet Vision was way too high. It was a bunch of things. So And then the people mover. But anyway, guys, thank you for listening and watching and reacting with me. This has been Shields. Please subscribe. We do these reactions. I love all of you. You have a great rest of your day. Until next time, peace out. Bye-bye.